Hello there, welcome to the Football Block. My name is Brandon, and today we have another episode of the Weekend Roundup, another episode of News Bits here. I'm going to talk about everything that has happened over the weekend in Europe's top 5 leagues, all the biggest matches, and everything that has occurred in those said matches. Now, this weekend, of course, there's always important games, there's always important stuff going on, but this week cannot necessarily compare to what happened last weekend with just the amount of games, the amount of huge matches, whether it be El Clasico, the Manchester Derby, those two huge high-profile matchups in Italy, Inter versus Roma, and Milan versus Napoli. This week, of course, does not compare, but that's not necessarily, a slight towards the games that are happening this weekend. It just shows how big of an ordeal it was on the last two Saturdays and Sundays. So, let's start off as usual in the Premier League, and on Saturday morning, we had Fulham going up against Manchester United. Now, Manchester United just came off their terrible, terrible loss to Manchester City in the Manchester Derby last weekend, but they also had a similarly humiliating performance against Newcastle United, where they were eliminated there in the Cup in midweek. Very, very poor performance for them. This result here was necessary that they had a win, and they did come away with a win, but it was only just. It ended up being a 1-0 result with a goal from Bruno Fernandes in the 92nd minute. It was a game, to be perfectly honest, that was very, very tight. Manchester United, this is one of the games that they're able to win by the skin of their teeth, by the sweat of their brow. And while it was actually a very, very nice goal from Bruno, and also I think it was an overall good performance from him considering the criticism that he's had as the captain of Manchester United recently, and then also it was his 200th appearance for the club. So I think good performance from him, good goal from him, but overall still a very lackluster performance from Manchester United there, even if you could argue that they probably deserved the win. It was not necessarily to the level that they should be playing with the immense talent they have. Now, to the other side of Manchester, and as we saw last weekend, and as we saw throughout the entirety of the season, the complete opposite here. Manchester City went up against the struggling Bournemouth side, and they won 6-1. An absolutely crushing results here. And the standout performer here is Jeremy Doku, the new signing, the winger there, who's actually been playing so good that he has benched Jack Grealish, the Belgian winger here, who, I think I've been watching this guy. I first saw him at Euro 2020 against Italy, where he came off the bench and was Belgium's most dangerous player. I'm surprised that it's taken this long for him to be bought by a big club, but I'm glad that, the general audience, especially the Premier League audience, is able to see how good of a player he is. Not to say that I'm some expert or something like that, but this guy is seriously good, as he not only scored the first goal, but he had 4 assists in this match. He assisted Bernardo Silva's goal, Akanji's goal, as well as Phil Foden and Bernardo Silva's second. Now, Bournemouth were able to grab a consolation goal, essentially, on the counter. Goal from Sinistera, excuse my pronunciation there. He is the Colombian striker on loan, his first goal for the club there. And then Nathan Ake, who scored against his former club there. Absolutely crushing win from Manchester City. And as you will see in the next few games we talk about, this result puts them top of the table. So the reigning champions are now top of the table again. We had a close 1-1 draw between Everton and Brighton as well. Very exciting game. A very evenly matched game. And then to round out Saturday, we had a very controversial game. We had Newcastle going up against Arsenal here. Arsenal, I thought, were really, really good at the beginning of the season, and I think the wheels are starting to fall off a little bit. I think fatigue is starting to set in. While I think that they were a little unlucky to concede a goal in the fashion that they did, I do think that overall Newcastle was a better team and probably deserved the finish. But of course, all the talk would be about the goal that Gordon scored. It was a goal that had controversial aspects to it for many reasons. Firstly, as in the build-up, the ball looked like it went out of play on the sideline. I personally think that it was kept in. Just enough, but obviously the full ball has to cross the line. I think it was kept in. But where I disagree with the referee's decision is when the ball was crossed in, there was a scuffle in the box, and it looked as if Joe Wellington pushed the Arsenal defender there. If you look at it on replay, you look at the still images, he has both hands pushed forward, and then in the scuffle, the ball bounced around, and Gordon was able to tap it in right past Ramsdale in goal. Personally, Diego Raya Raya in goal. But I personally think that this goal, there is no way that this should have stood. I mean, like I just said, you look at the replay, you look at the still images. I have no idea how this was not called back for a clear foul. I think Arsenal did get unlucky here. That being said, they were very poor in attack. Kai Havertz did not have a good game in front of goal. I think Arsenal created very, very, very little. It did not really look like they were going to score at any point of the game. So while they can consider themselves unlucky, I think that Newcastle, in the end of the day, did deserve to come away with the win here. Now, on the next day, we had Luton Town going up against Liverpool, and Luton Town, the minnows in the Premier League, they are currently 17th in the table. They're not really doing too well, but they had a big performance today. They were winning for a majority of the match. They scored, and it looked like they were going to close out a very historic win until Luis Diaz, of all players, came up with a very nice header to equalize to save his team. But all the headlines will be towards Luis Diaz's celebration. He lifted up his shirt and he had a wonderful message there, Libertad por Papá, meaning liberty or freedom for his father, who has been kidnapped, unfortunately, by ELN, communist guerrilla group in his native Colombia. They were essentially holding his father for ransom. Very, very tragic scenes there for Luis Diaz, who has been pleading for his father to be released. Obviously, prayers go to Luis Diaz and his family, specifically his father, and good performance from him. Actually, overall, a disappointing performance from Liverpool as well. It looked like they were about to slip up there if not for that Diaz goal. And then on Monday, we had a very exciting game, possibly the most exciting game out of all the big matchups, at least this weekend. Tottenham going up against Chelsea, and this was a game that was truly back and forth. This was a game that had everything in it: goals, disallowed goals, red cards, crazy challenges. The game started off, I thought, completely in Tottenham's favor. Kulusevski scored a lucky goal, took a deflection, but it was all Tottenham in the first, 20 minutes. It looked like Son had doubled the lead, but then his goal was called off for offside. I think it was a little harsh to call it for offside, although, if you take a really, really in-depth look at the offside, I'm sure it'll go in the favor of the referee's final decision, but still very, very close. Razor's edge in terms of how close this game was, but Cuti Romero, had a bit of a clanker. He was way too aggressive. He was going for challenges. He had a challenge there in the beginning of the match that probably should have been a red card. It wasn't given, and then he had another challenge. There was a huge mix-up. If there was one thing that this game had, it was just crazy runs of play that you wouldn't expect. There was a strange counterattack. Sterling got the ball pinged around in the box, it bounced off his hand, and he was able to poke it into the net. Now, the goal was called back for that handball, correctly so, but in the build-up of that goal, that disallowed goal there, Cuti Romero went studs up on his compatriot, his fellow Argentine, Enzo Fernandez. Complete studs up challenge there, straight red. After the referee looked at the VAR, deservedly so, he gave the red card to Romero, but I think that completely ruined Tottenham's game plan. Not only that, obviously it was in the box, so it resulted in a penalty. Cole Palmer stepped up, who I think Cole Palmer has been having a pretty good season, slightly under the radar. he was able to bury the penalty, although just so. The goalkeeper almost saved it, almost kept it out. But from that moment on, it was just utter chaos. There was an extra 12 minutes added on to halftime there, and then into the second half, though, it was still very close. I think that if you look at both teams, they both had many chances, but Udogie, the Tottenham defender, got a second yellow, and then he got sent off. And then from that point on, I think that completely changed the match in Chelsea's favor there, because it was still pretty even. Maybe Chelsea at this point had more chances, but it didn't look like it was an assured victory. At this point, though, it definitely did after that red card there. Nico Jackson scored a pretty simple goal after a nice assist from Sterling. And then from that point on, Tottenham completely just fell apart. And Nico Jackson scored two very easy goals after the 90th minute to complete a hat trick, interestingly enough. And the final score ending 4-1 in favor of Chelsea. Pochettino's return home to Tottenham ends in a great win for him. I don't think you can really criticize Tottenham that much. It was a very unlucky performance. I think 4-1 is a little flattering to Chelsea. Of course, you can criticize their defenders, though. Cuti Romero and Udogie, they really needed to, keep their head in the match and keep their cool, because, those two challenges right there is essentially what lost their team the game. So anyway, moving on to Spain, and we look at La Liga here. Not as many big matches as we had last weekend, as I said before, but still there was some really interesting stuff going on Friday. We had Las Palmas going up against Atletico Madrid. Las Palmas is a team that has been struggling for the most part, but recently they've had some good results. They're now 10th in La Liga. But still, this is a game that you would expect Atletico Madrid to come away with a win, considering how good they've been, how many good results have they had, as well as individual performances on the pitch. But in typical Atletico fashion, they don't like to have their fans sit comfortably. They always like to have their fans living on the edge of their seats, because they decided to lose this match here 2-1 to Las Palmas. It was a game that I think Atletico were the better team. I think they had much more shots, and they had much more just proactive plays, dynamic attacks going forward. I think Morata had a really good game. Griezmann didn't really have as much of an impactful performance as he's had in the past, but it was surprisingly Las Palmas who opened the score there. And then, like I said, Atletico created many chances. So after Rodriguez's his opening goal for Las Palmas, Riquelme hit the post, for example. Morata hit the crossbar as well, but it was another defensive mistake which led to a goal from Ramirez to double the lead for Las Palmas to 2-0. Now, quickly after that, Morata was able to have the deficit, and he almost scored an equalizer, but it was too little too late, and Las Palmas come away with the win. Now, they were the home team. Atletico was traveling, so there is that advantage there, but still, this is a game that Atletico need to win. Now, they still have the game in hand, and if they were to win that game, they would go up to 28 points, so they would be in third, which is not a bad result at all, but still, if they had any hopes of winning the league, this should have been a must-win game. Now, it's not impossible, but still, this was a game that they needed to win. Now, on to the next day, we had Real Sociedad hosting Barcelona. Very, very crucial matchup here. Both teams have been playing pretty well. Both teams have been in interesting form. Both teams have had players who have been playing very good, both in La Liga as well as the Champions League. Real Sociedad is not as consistent as they were throughout the entirety of last season. They are sitting 7th in La Liga right now, but still, on their day, they are one of the best teams in the world. Meanwhile, Barcelona is coming off that painful Clasico loss at the death to Real Madrid last weekend. They were looking to redeem themselves here, and for majority of this match, I have to be honest, it was looking like they were not going to redeem themselves, and that their heartbreak would just go farther, because I thought in the opening stages of this match, considering, or in particular, like the first 20 minutes, it was all Real Sociedad. Barcelona looked shell-shocked. They looked tired. They looked fatigued. They looked like they didn't really want to be there. Real Sociedad was running them ragged, and if it wasn't for Ter Stegen and if it wasn't for just last-ditch defending from some of their center backs, this could have been 2-3-0 by the 45th minute. But Barcelona was able to hold on, and then in the second half, after a few changes, they were able to kind of stabilize the match, and then within the last like 20 minutes, they were able to shift the momentum in their favor. I think, ironically, the player that was leading the charge was Ronald Araujo, who's playing as a right back. He came up, he had so many shots on goals, whether it be a header, whether it be some type of volley, just a shot from far out. He was the one that was getting things done. And then what ended up winning the game, because there was a few scares here and there, it looked like Barcelona had scored, goals was called back, but in the 93rd minute, Gundogan sent a looping ball over the top of the defense, a beautiful ball into the box there. Ronald Araujo came in through the back and put the ball into the back of the net. Very, very crucial goal there. Very important goal because Barcelona was able to solidify their spot in third place. But questions still need to be asked about this overall performance. Now, speaking of the table, the top of the table is now Girona. Because they came away with a very, very important win over Osasuna. This was a close match, a match that probably should not have been that close considering how good Girona has played. But you still have to consider, despite not playing as well as they did last season, Osasuna still has that talent within him. They still have that, bravado that they carried with them all last year. Girona scored first goal from Martin there, but a few defensive mishaps, a few mistakes here and there led to a brace from Budimir, the Croatian striker, the ever-present Croatian striker I feel like he's been with this team forever. Osasuna was surprisingly able to take a 2-1 win just after the resuming of play after halftime. But the Ukrainian duo, Dovbrek and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Zykov or something. Both of them combined to grab the lead back for Girona to gain that 3-2 lead, only for another goal from Garcia to solidify it with a 4-2 victory. Very, very crucial win there for Girona, who I think going forward played really well, but they need to be careful with their defensive mistakes. Similar to Atletico Madrid, they are very good going forward, but they need to clean it up at the back, in my opinion. We also had a 2-0 win for Real Betis over Mallorca. A goal from William Jose as well as Jose Perez. And then Sevilla was not able to come away with 3 points, but Celta Vigo was able to stabilize a little bit there. Both of those teams playing out a 1-1 draw. A goal from En-Nesyri saving Sevilla from a loss there in the final 10 minutes. Now, moving on to Sunday's games, we had a crucial game here. Very, very exciting game. One of the most exciting games this weekend. Villarreal versus Athletic Bilbao. And Villarreal, I think, had a few chances in the first half. Going forward, they weren't too bad, but defensively, it was utter calamity. The Nico brothers, usual suspects for Athletic Bilbao, were just tearing it up. Nico and Iñaki playing off each other, playing great. It was actually De Galarreta that scored the opening goal. Very, very nice strike from him. And then Nico and Iñaki then made it 3-0. By the 30th minute, they were just tearing Villarreal's defense to shreds. And then it looked like that they were going to be able to score a fourth, maybe even a fifth as the second half started. But then the momentum started to die down a little bit, and despite Villarreal playing so terribly in the first half, they still are a very talented team. Gerard Moreno was able to score a pretty nice goal to make it 3-1, which looked like just a simple consolation goal until Adam Sorloth, with a nice looping header, made it 3-2 only a minute later, and it was a very, very nerve-wracking and nail-biting end for Athletic Bilbao fans. And I think that this is a characteristic of Ernesto Valverde's team, as Athletic Bilbao is doing good in the table. They are 5th right now, and, like I just said, it was a very, very good performance in the first half there, but how many times have we seen a comeback, or at least an attempted comeback, that almost achieved their goal against an Ernesto Valverde team? I think that is something that, as a manager, that is his weakness. That is his Achilles heel. It's trying to just maintain a cool head when you have such an insurmountable lead. Now, anyway, moving on, our last game to talk about was Real Madrid going up against Rayo Vallecano. This is a game that, in order to stay top of the table, they had to win, but they fumbled a little bit. It was a 0-0 result. It was, defensively from Rayo Vallecano, very, very admirable performance there, but Real Madrid in front of goal just looked a little lost. I have to say, watching this game, Luka Modric, who started in this game, and he has not really been starting a lot in this season so far, he looked like a 37-year-old, which he is a 37-year-old, but usually he's playing like he's a 27-year-old. I don't know if it is, father time finally catching up to him, or if Modric is just having a bit of a dry spell, because that's happened before, especially after, international tournaments. But he has not really been having the best performance this year. He gave the ball away a few times. And then also Vinicius Jr. is not having a good run of form either. I thought he had a pretty poor game against Barcelona, and I don't think he redeemed himself here in this game against Rayo Vallecano. No goals or no assists to show for that. He also, it looks like he's getting frustrated in front of the goal. He's been getting into some scuffles, some fights, and things like that. Ancelotti, it looks like, has been trying to keep his head cool, trying to keep him focused on the football, on what's happening on the pitch. But I think, and I've said this many, many times before, I think this is the results of selling Benzema and then not having a direct replacement. Yes, Joselu is a good, reliable La Liga striker, but he is not world-class. He is not Benzema, nor is he Mbappe. But, I mean, it is kind of expected, I guess, that Mbappe will be coming in the summer. So, moving on to Italy, we also had some pretty fun matchups here. On Friday, Bologna was able to defeat Lazio 1-0. Kind of a surprise victory there. I thought Lazio looked pretty poor in front of goal. And because of this loss, they sit 10th in Serie A. Meanwhile, Bologna is up in 6th, interestingly enough. We also had another upset here. AC Milan losing 1-0 to Udinese. Now, this was a game that I think was, for the most part, back and forth. But I think Udinese was the deserved winner here. I think that even though Milan had a lot of chances in front of goal, they were not clinical with them at all. And all of their chances, minus 1 or 2, were not clear goal-scoring opportunities. It was, a nice build-up play, and then it doesn't really amount to anything. A shot from far out, or, an individual brilliance that doesn't really amount to anything from one of their more technically skilled players. But it was a penalty from Pereira, the Argentinian winger who used to play for Watford and Juventus, if you remember him, who is turning into a legend at Udinese. He scored the sole goal here as Udinese won 1-0, which is not good for Milan in terms of their title aspirations. As for the next games in that very same day, Napoli followed up their good performance against Milan from last week, specifically in that second half, with another good performance here against Salernitana, a 2-0 win. It was an overall good performance. Raspadori scored, as well as Elmas. Really, really comfortable win there. A win that Napoli needed, which pushed them up to, a comfortable spot in 4th place. And then we had a, very, very heavyweight matchup between Atalanta, a team that has been punching above their weights for the past, it feels like 6 or 7 years. They've kind of ushered themselves into the top echelon of Serie A, against Inter Milan, who, in my opinion, is the best team in Italy this year by a considerable gap. And I think this match was a blatant example of that, as Atalanta played well. They did not have a poor performance. This was a very admirable performance from Atalanta, but they still could not touch Inter Milan. It was An opening goal from Çalhanoğlu off a penalty. Matteo Darmian was the one that got fouled. I think after he came off the bench, he actually had a very, very good game there in defense. But even though he was a defender, I thought he did very good bombing up and down the pitch. He did his defensive duties. He had a few really good tackles here, but also some really good attacking runs, created some good attacks there. And then the wonder strike, one of the best goals of the weekend, if not the best goal this weekend, was from Lautaro Martinez. He picked up the box from the corner of the 18 and then sent in an absolutely curling rocket into the side netting. No chance there from the goalkeeper, no chance from Musso in Atalanta's goal. Now, Scamacca was able to equalize for Atalanta, or not equalize, he was able to grab one back to make it 2-1, and then Scamacca had a few chances here and there. Sommer made a mistake, but then was able to redeem himself by making a wonderful save after kind of fumbled the ball and dropped it in the feet of Scamacca, but made a good save to block his second effort there. Overall, even though Atalanta had a few chances here and there, I think that it was just an overall much better performance from Inter Milan. Very, very strong performance from them, further proving why they are the best team in Italy, in my opinion. Then we also had on the next day in Serie A, Roma going up against Lecce. This was a game that Roma absolutely had to win, considering their poor starts in Serie A so far this year. But Lecce would actually score first, even though I think Roma had much more chances. Roma were doing better. They had the momentum on their favor. It was not. It just looked like it wasn't going to click for them this day. Dybala missed some chances. He had a few shots that just whistled past the bar. Lukaku missed a penalty, but after Lecce scored that goal, it looked like Roma had just a resurgence of life. Azmoun, the Iranian striker, scored a wonderful header to equalize in the 92nd minute. And then 3 minutes later, Lukaku scored. He was able to bundle the ball over the net. Good finish from him. Redeemed himself for that penalty miss and had ended up being a very crucial win for Roma there. And then another close victory was also Fiorentina's loss to Juventus. Typical Allegri performance, going away to Fiorentina's home stadium with less than 5 shots overall in the match. An early goal from Moretti and then just parking the bus. Typical Allegri Juventus performance, but as much as you can criticize it for being boring or being silly, it ended up in a victory for Juventus, who is now second in Serie A, only behind Inter Milan. Now let's move on to the Bundesliga. Let's move on to Germany, and we had the title matchup of this weekend. The most important match this weekend, we had Der Klassiker, Borussia Dortmund hosting Bayern Munich. Borussia Dortmund had a pretty poor start to the season, but they looked like they picked themselves back up. Looked like they were getting back on their feet. They had a few good results here and there in the Champions League as well as Bundesliga. Bayern, of course, is Bayern. They aren't top of the table. So they're not unstoppable. They've had some hiccups here and there. They've had some defensive mistakes. So theoretically, this should have been a close game, but in reality, this was anything but. It was an absolutely humiliating destruction. 4-0 victory for Bayern Munich, and I gotta admit, I am not surprised by this at all. It doesn't matter how good Borussia Dortmund is playing. It doesn't matter who is on the field. It doesn't matter who's a manager. Whenever they go up against Bayern Munich, they just seem to collapse, and usually in spectacular fashion. Case in point in this match here, where from minute 1, it was all Bayern Munich. Upamecano scored the opening goal off a corner. Very nice header in the 4th minute, but you have to question who was marking him, what was the defensive shape on that set piece. And then only 5 minutes later, in the 9th minute, Harry Kane doubled the lead, and I think from that moment on, the game was over. It was literally over from that point on. The only close chance that Borussia Dortmund had was a really nice shot from Marco Reus, but beyond that, there was no hope for Borussia Dortmund. There was times where Bayern Munich kind of dropped off, and then it didn't really look like they were concerned with going forward, and there still wasn't even any hope for Borussia Dortmund there. Then Harry Kane had a second, and Bayern Munich's third deep into the second half before scoring with one of the final kicks of the game to complete a hat trick. Harry Kane continues his amazing goal-scoring form. He is doing very, very well in the Bundesliga. He's loving life at Bayern Munich. He's got 15 goals so far in the league. And on one hand, you almost want to feel bad for Borussia Dortmund, but on the other hand, this is a disaster of their own making. They don't bring in talented managers. They're not bringing in sufficient players, and then they keep selling the best players that they create. Meanwhile, Bayern Munich just keeps sweeping them up. But Bayern Munich, despite playing so well, is not top of the table. The team that is still top of the table is Bayer Leverkusen, who keeps coming away with these important wins here. Now, this one, they had to work hard for it. Wirtz scored, and then Grimaldo scored to make it 2-0 over Hoffenheim, who is kind of having a resurgence of a season. They're 6th right now. Hoffenheim was able to equalize in the second half with 2 goals within 2 minutes, but then Grimaldo scored a second. He's looking to be a really good signing for Bayer Leverkusen, and Bayer Leverkusen was able to hold on to that 3-2 win there to keep them top of the table. There was also an explosion of goals between Freiburg and Mönchengladbach. 3-3 results here. Very, very fun game to watch, almost a typical Bundesliga match. And then we had, on the next day, unfortunately, Stuttgart, who was playing amazing. It looks like the train has come to a halt. Obviously, Guirassy, the player who has been scoring off the charts for them, he has been injured. And then Stuttgart fall to a 2-0 loss to Heidenheim. A match that you would really expect them to win considering the form that they are in. So anyway, let's move on to the last league we're going to look at. We have Ligue 1, and Montpellier was not able to overcome PSG. They fell to a 3-0 loss there. PSG still second in the table. They aren't first, but they had a very convincing performance here. Lee Kang-in scored a goal early on, as well as another goal from Zaire Emery, one of the most exciting youth talents in the entire world, and Vitinha, the new signing, was able to score third there, as he looks to really solidify himself into the team after kind of being a bench player last season, his first season. Marseille and Lille fell to a 0-0 result. Lille is 5th in the table. They've had some good results lately. Marseille has been severely up and down. This is a match that doesn't really benefit either of them, in my opinion. And then on Sunday, Lyon tied Metz. Now, this was an important game for Lyon. Every game is an important game for Lyon. They have to win as many games as they can, and they, unfortunately for their sake, were not able to come away with that win, and they still sit in 18th place in Ligue 1, bottom of the table there. Absolutely crazy. Elsewhere, Monaco is back to winning ways. A goal from Zakaria and a goal from Golovin, who's been having a good season, sealed a 2-0 win over Brest, who themselves are not having that bad of a season either. And then Nice, who is actually top of the table in Liga, they also came away with a 2-0 win over Rennes. Very, very respectable performance from them as well to hold on to their top spot. So, that has been the weekend roundup for this weekend here. Like I said, not as many exciting or blockbuster matchups as last weekend, but still some important games here. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. What are your thoughts on everything that has happened this weekend? Make sure to type them in that comment section there. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Share this video with a friend. But anyway, guys, my name is Brandon, and I hope you have a nice rest of your night.